Hello, World Wide Web. Welcome back. We are at ReCon 2016. Welcome to Hangin' With. I'm GW Pomichter. Thanks for logging on and tuning in. If you haven't already, we really appreciate it if you get on there and subscribe for us. Come back over and over again and hear from creators, authors, writers, game designers, musicians, filmmakers, you name it. We love to talk about creativity on the show. So come on back and subscribe. We are here, as we said before, at ReCon 2016, hosted by the Historical Miniature Game Society, who is celebrating your 20th anniversary here at the International Palms Resort, beautiful I-Drive in Orlando, Florida. We're here with HMGS President, that is Historic Miniature Game Society, South Chapter.
Correct.
South Chapter. President Marc Rebhun.
That's it.
Marc Rebhun. And Marc, this is a fantastic event.
Oh, thank you.
You've done a great job. Thanks for coming in and hanging with us,
thank
man.
you.
We really do appreciate it. Now, first of all, let's talk about gaming.
Okay.
Okay. How did you first become interested in gaming? And this is a very detailed kind of gaming. So kind of tell us how you got in here.
A lot of it did, I developed an interest in history, which drove it first. And I like things to be a little bit more interactive. Reading is fine, but it's nothing like, for example, visiting a battlefield. And this was a way to bring the history alive for me.
Okay.
Being able to see it in the 3 dimensions, being able to manipulate it, to be able to interact, if you will, with it. So that got me started at first. At first, I thought I was one of the only ones out there. I didn't realize there was others like me who were interested in
This is
gaming.
quite a community.
It is, and it's the widest community that I think you can imagine. We have you name the profession, it's probably in that other room over there.
We talked about that earlier. We talked about the fact that when we first discussed coming in to do the show here, I had visions in my mind of legions of my children lining up to play games. And when I got here, it was very enlightening to see the variation, the diversity from all walks of life, all age groups, all different interest levels here to enjoy immersing yourself in history, in fiction, in a story.
Exactly.
And so now this is the 20th anniversary of the society, this chapter of the society, in that 20 years, we talked earlier about the idea that when we were younger, gaming was a small community. Comics were a small community. Exactly. All of these are, but they're pop culture phenomenons today. There's a lot more interest in it today. What have you seen in terms of growth in the gaming community in the 20 years with the club, and since you've been interested in it, and what's next? Where's it going from here?
That's an interesting question about where it's going. Where it came from very narrow roots. It actually came from the model soldier folks. And a lot of folks would show up at conventions where they would just show off their gaming or their figures historically painted. And then a group of us decided to get a little more hands-on with it, if you will. And because of that and because of where it started, a lot of the early gaming was Napoleonics, for example.
Okay.
And that seemed to be the predominant. You'd go to these conventions and you'd see mostly Napoleonic games.
For our worldwide web audience there, we were looking for an analogy to share, to say, okay, until you see the video, what you're going to go watch all these guys do their thing. But before you do that, the analogy would be to take something like a board game, like Risk, but really zoom in and see one battle or one campaign, in extreme detail. And so, but that's more the Napoleonic styling. But we've seen a lot of other kinds of games in there too. We've seen hexagon-style moving games. We've seen there's some science fiction games in there. And so is that growth new, or is that something that's just kind of a part of the culture the whole time?
I think it's more of an acceptance. At one time, a lot of the science fiction that you see, a lot of the fantasy that you'll see out there, a lot of the role-playing that you'll see out there, we tended to be a bit of snobs, just like the model soldier folks was. They didn't want to put your hands on the figures. We were purists, or just be history. When we realized it's all the same thing. It's a love of gaming, it's a love of the comradeship, it's the creativity. And whether you're painting a zombie or painting a World War II soldier, you're painting a Napoleonic soldier, there's a lot to share. There's techniques to share, there's a love of the hobby, and there's a love of
In writing, I tend to tell people that a good writer, a good creator, the mission is to tell the truth.
Okay.
The fact is important sometimes, but the truth is more important. It's about the human condition.
Right.
And so whether you're using a Civil War battlefield or the kind of naval battles that we see on the Enterprise, we just happened to walk past that game, it made me think of it,
Okay.
or other things, you're telling something about the human spirit, the human condition, and where we come from.
Right.
And if you're doing that well, I guess then you're successful in whatever you're creating. And in gaming, especially because, like you said, it's interactive.
Right.
People actually are interacting. They're experiencing it. Now, as the president of HMGS, it falls to you and your team to organize an event like this.
Right.
You have, I would love to just say dozens, but that would be a pale number of gamers, creators, as well as players to coordinate here, to put this event together. Tell us a little bit about organizing this event and the not just the process for those that are out there that are thinking, hey, this is a big thing, but about the kind of logistics of it and what makes it all worthwhile.
One of the nice things about it is I started, like many of the people do, was just a player. So I grew up within the club, if you will. I got immersed by other people. Other people always led the way for me. And so as we began to progress and we began to look at that, they taught me lessons about how to put this together. And to be quite honest, it's the members that put it together. We're just administrative, basically. I mean, it sounds a lot tougher than it is. We do keep busy, but it's not, as we used to call it in the military, administrivia. We take care of all those small details, those type of things that keep the thing, or the lubricant that keeps it running. But it's the gamers really that make the show, that get together, that put on their efforts, that bring their figures, that
and you brought some amazing creative people to bear here. We've had the benefit of talking to several of them already, and just there's such a spirit here of comradeship and shared interest.
Right.
And again, from all walks of life, we've from accountants to game producers and everything in between.
Absolutely.
And that's fantastic. What do you enjoy most about the convention?
Oh, it's the comradeship by far. Most of these people I see twice a year just at the convention. And it's like-minded. You don't feel like you have to explain your hobby to them. You don't have to be afraid you're looking like a nerd or something in front of them. Everybody's a shared experience. And I've got some good friends there that I just see twice a year, and I still consider them good friends.
Have you observed the crowds and the attendance at the events go up as pop culture has embraced gaming and the different hobbies that people have a little more broadly?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people now that aren't afraid to be a little curious, to come to one of these conventions and decide to push the figures around or get into one of the role-playing games.
Well, to repeat a phrase I'm sure someone else has already coined, as we come here we realize, we were talking off camera earlier about the fact that as we grew up gaming and things like that, we saw things like Dungeons and Dragons, and then, like you said, the more purist historical gaming. When you put those two things, again, they were juxtaposed very distinctly years ago. But in either category, you were the guy waiting to be stuffed in a locker in your underwear.
Exactly. Yeah,
and that's right. But today, geek is chic. It's the age of the geek. And we all get to come out and play our games and celebrate our pop culture and celebrate our fiction and our fantasy. And those things are amazing. What would you now? You said you grew up in the club. Right. How long have you been the president of the club?
I've been president for the last 5 years.
For the last 5 years, so you've been involved in or organizing many conventions.
Right.
Okay. So we like to have a little fun. We want to know what's the most unusual or unique thing that you've seen at a convention since you've been planning it?
Oh my goodness, it's really puts me on the spot on that. We do have some very creative folks, and we have one gentleman who likes to run a Pulp Fiction type game.
Oh wow.
But what it is that's used as grist for the debrief afterwards. And so we may play for only an hour or two, but we take the experiences, we all get together in a room, and it's almost like a play put on by your local theater group. We have to say what went on, we have to act out the roles, what happened, and tell the story that way based on what happened in the game.
So it's gameplay. That's a tabletop
It's
type
a
thing?
tabletop game.
So it's a tabletop game,
Right.
and then the debrief is almost like a live action role play game.
Exactly. And what happens, too, is you may be at one end of the table. I don't know what's going on there. I'm at the other, and we don't know how these stories interact or interrelate until we get into that other room and we hear what went on here or what went on there.
Wow.
And it's really a little bit like if you ever want to do a little play acting in your life or get on stage, it's a little bit like that.
We have some kids at home that like to do some live action role play games.
Okay.
And in fact, at Necronomicon this year, my son had his bachelor party at Necronomicon.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And the kids went out and did some live action role playing, and it
Right.
looked like a blast.
It is.
As I said off camera, I'm a little bit of an introvert, so I have to kind of, I watch a lot, and I'm fascinated by it, and it's
Right.
great, but it does look like a lot of fun. There's a lot of games in there.
Right.
Tons of games in there.
There are.
There are homemade games.
Right.
There are commercially available games.
Right.
There are games that are debuting,
Mhm.
in some cases at conventions and places like that.
Correct.
Do you have a favorite?
I don't know that I have a favorite as much as I have a favorite period, if you will.
Okay.
And for me, that's World War II.
World War II?
And that was driven by the fact I'm still of the generation, my father actually fought in World War II. And for ages, he would tell me these stories about his time in England. I thought he had been a clerk in England, only to find out he had been a combat soldier who had landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day and
Wow.
fought across France.
Wow.
But, of course, the veterans never talked about that. And
No,
he
they didn't.
instilled in me that interest and wanting to know more about the period. And as a result, I also like to play games or interact in that particular period.
That's fantastic. Now, as juxtaposed to some of the board gaming and things that people are more the more popular things that people know about,
Right.
historical gaming has its roots in the event.
Correct.
In an actual event.
Right.
Is it more difficult, would you say, or more challenging to get gameplay? I mean, you know the end of the game.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
So when people are playing,
Right.
what's the most challenging part of getting that suspension of disbelief to get them into their role?
Mhm.
We all know how Normandy went.
Right.
To play it out as a player, though,
Right.
what draws people to that, do you think?
I think there's two things. It's still competitive, and
Okay.
there's still a chance, of course, to change history, but perhaps by playing through it to understand it. And one of the things that most of our game masters do are try to make the victory conditions a little different. In other words, you know that they're going to storm the beach and be eventually successful. But do they do it faster or slower than they did historically? Do the Germans cause more or less casualties? It sounds a little gross.
Well,
but-
no, I actually think that you use the one word that is underused,
Okay.
and that is knowing is one thing, but understanding is
Right.
very different. And we're all struggling to do that every day.
Right.
And if gameplay seems to be a great way to immerse yourself in the environment, to
Mhm.
understand
Sure.
what it is. We do like, we're a pop culture web show.
Right.
We like to mix it up a little bit.
Sure.
And nobody is better at pop culture references than the gaming and this community. We've learned that in the
Right.
last day and a half. So we want to ask you, well, I know the answer to this question. Why do I have this card? He told me the answer already, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. All right. You hop in the TARDIS with the doctor. You can go to any place in time that you could go. Where
Right.
do you go?
I would love to have been a fly on the shoulder of my father when he lands on Normandy Beach.
Wow.
I can't imagine what he went through.
It boggles my warfare and service change
Right.
so much from generation to generation. New technologies,
Exactly.
new strategies, new tactics. We learned backwards. We learned a lot from those guys at Normandy.
We did.
As an infantryman myself, I look
Okay.
back at Normandy and I think to myself, my God, man.
Yeah, how would you like to have
the
been in that
notion,
circumstance?
everything that I was taught and everything that I learned was small unit tactics
Right.
in working as a squad, working as a team. Sometimes working with your platoon or even with your company.
Right.
But
right.
the notion of acting as a part of that landing force,
Exactly.
which it's multiple divisions, it's a massive thing,
Right.
and every guy is a cog in that wheel.
Right.
It boggles my mind.
Yeah.
My grandfather was in the Pacific,
Oh,
and everything in World War II was on that scale. It was
Right.
massive. And I mean, we all know, we've seen Saving Private Ryan and things like that. We've seen the small unit skirmishes,
Right.
but the mass of it was so immense that as we look at the CNN modern warfare,
Right.
we scarcely understand the
Right.
scale of it all.
Right.
and the stakes are just as high. The battle is just as difficult, and my son's plight is the same as mine and my father's and my grandfather's. But the scale of World War II is something that I think just draws your collective imagination.
And something we'll never see again. I mean, over 5,000 ships off the coast of Normandy. That'll
The
never
good
happen
Lord
again.
willing, we will not ever see anything as as fiery and destructive as that kind of a force.
Right.
It had been thousands of years since we had seen it before,
Right.
and the good Lord willing, it'll be thousands of years until anybody ever has to see it again. So, thanks for talking to us, Mark. It really is. Thanks for having us here.
Oh,
This
it's been our
has
pleasure.
been an education for us. We enjoy gaming. Our kids have more tabletop gaming than we grew up with. Even we grew up on the little stuff. And when I say little stuff, Monopoly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
Absolutely.
little compared to some of the stuff that these guys are doing in the other room.
Right.
And so our kids are gamers and stuff. And like I said, we envisioned tons of them.
Right.
And what we saw here was just welcome. We are part of a community, and that made us feel incredible, and that's wonderful.
Good.
So I've got a card up here that says I have to wrap it up.
All right.
So I want to thank our partners and sponsors over at Something Unique Magazine, Books, Chocolate, and Wine, Florida Book News, Authors for Authors, the guys at Wordfire Press, keep it up out there, guys, and our new friends here at the Historic Miniature Game Society, whose next convention, I'm told, will be in September.
Last weekend in September.
Last weekend of September 2016. So if you can find that online, look for it. What's the website address?
It's www.hmgs-south.com.
HMGS-South.com. Find that down here in the description, folks. I'm G.W. Pomichter. We have been hanging with Marc Rebhun, the president of the Historical Miniature Gaming Society. Congratulations on 20 years.
Thank you.
20 more to you, sir.
And we're glad to have shared it with you.
Thank you so much for doing that. Guys out there, keep tuning in. Keep logging on. Remember to subscribe. Come on back over and over and over again and see who we're hanging with next.
Soon.